Nrinam Bhagavan Nrinam. Translation. O King, it is therefore essential that every human being hear about, glorify, and remember the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, always and everywhere. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Shukadeva Goswami begins this verse with the word tasmat, or therefore, because in the previous verse, he has already explained that there is no auspicious means for salvation other than the sublime process of Bhakti Yoga. The Bhakti Yoga process is practiced by the devotees in different methods, like hearing, chanting, remembering, serving lotus feet, worshiping, praying, rendering service and love, and becoming friendly and offering all that one may possess. All 9 methods are bona fide methods, and either all of them, some of them, or even one of them can bring about the desired result for the sincere devotee. But out of all of the 9 different methods, the first one, namely hearing, is the most important function in the process of Bhakti Yoga. Without hearing sufficiently and properly, no one can make any progress by any of the methods of practice. And for hearing only, all the Vedic literatures are there, compiled by authorized persons like Vyasadeva, who is the powerful incarnation of Godhead. And since it has been ascertained that the Lord is the super soul of everything, he should therefore be heard and glorified everywhere and always. That is the special duty of the human being. When the human being gives up the process of hearing about the all-pervading personality of Godhead, he becomes victim to hearing rubbish transmitted by man-made machines. Machinery is not bad, because through the machine, one can take advantage of hearing about the Lord. But because machinery is used for ulterior purposes, it is creating rapid degradation in the standard of human civilization. It is said here that it is incumbent upon the human beings to hear, because the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are made for that purpose. Living beings, other than human beings, have no ability to hear such Vedic literatures. If human society gives itself to the process of hearing the Vedic literature, it will not become victim to the impious sounds vibrated by impious men who degrade the standards of the total society. Hearing is solidified by the process of chanting. One who has perfectly heard from the perfect source becomes convinced about the all-pervading personality of Godhead, and thus becomes enthusiastic in glorifying the Lord. All the great acharyas like Ramanujacharya Madhva, Chaitanya Saraswati Thakur, or even in other countries, Muhammad Christ and others, have all extensively glorified the Lord by chanting always and in every place. Because the Lord is all-pervading, it is essential to glorify him always and everywhere. In the process of glorifying the Lord, there should be no restriction of time and place. This is called Sanatana Dharma or Bhagavata Dharma. Sanatana means eternal, always and everywhere. Bhagavata means pertaining to Bhagavan, the Lord. The Lord is the master of all time and all space, and therefore the Lord's holy name must be heard, glorified, and remembered everywhere in the world. That will bring about the desired peace and prosperity so eagerly awaited by the people of the world. The word cha includes all the remaining processes or methods of bhakti yoga as mentioned above. So, tasmat sarvatmana rajan, hari sarvatra sarvada, shrotavya kirtitavyash cha, smartavyo bhagavan nrinam. Tasmat. Well, Prabhupada's comment about tasmat, or therefore, is from the previous verse, which I can read, but it also refers to everything else. Now, the previous verse is an explanation of, very detailed explanation of seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living being, along with the individual soul, by taking help from the intelligence. Very long purport, which is confirming the last few verses prior to this one. The singular importance of bhakti, the singular importance of the direct process of devotional service, the singular importance of rati, or bringing the mind with attachment to the personality of Godhead. Let's go back. Another, therefore, is response to the question that was asked by Maharaj Parikshit in the end of Canto 1. The question asked at the end of Canto 1 was, Shukadeva Goswami, you've come, you're an exalted personality. Can you please tell me 2 questions? What is that subject matter that one should hear about always? Shrotavya, same Sanskrit terms. Shrotavya kirtitavya jaya pujasta nityada. Here is Shrotavya kirtitavya smartavyo bhagavan nrinam. Same Sanskrit, almost. He wanted to know, I'm about to die. What's my duty when I'm about to die? And what is that subject matter that one should always hear and chant and remember? Dhyaya pujas chanityada. So here's the therefore that one should hear about Hari. So in response to that question at the end of chapter 19, the first 3 chapters of Canto 2, one can say, is a summary of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And then from those answers, further questions and further explanations. But a summary is these first 3 chapters of Canto 2. So they're very important verses. The first chapter of Canto 2 is 2 main things, 1 main thing plus, so description of the Virat Rupa, how to see a person within that which we can perceive with our senses, that's material nature. How to perceive the Supreme Person, how to perceive person within the vastness of material nature. And it's a very interesting, different than the same Virat Rupa description found in, let's say, for example, chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita, the universal form. It's still the universal form, it's just looking at the universal form through a different lens or from a different perspective. But the idea in chapter 1 is developing, for those that don't have one, developing a personal conception of the Supreme based upon what one sees in material nature, because that is perceivable. And the second subtopic in chapter 1 is devotional service. It's not in the foreground, but it's in chapter 1, the importance of devotional service. Chapter 2, graduating or moving on from the universal form, is meditation on the Paramatma feature. So, localized Paramatma realization. And with that, there's a number of indirect processes that are identified. It's not flushed out in detail, but indirect processes, because those indirect processes are meant to bring one to the direct process. Say it again. Indirect processes are meant to bring one to the direct process. And the direct process being surrendering to and devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this chapter 2, Shukadeva Goswami says that of all these different processes, there's one that's the best. Same as chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. Of all the different systems of yoga, one is best. What's that one that's best? Devotional service, bhakti yoga. There's indirect and there's direct. Those that don't know the purpose of the indirect can get lost. Those that know the purpose of the indirect can progress to the direct. And by the association of those that know the purpose of the Vedas, what's the purpose of the Vedas? To know Krishna. Chapter 15, Bhagavad Gita. Vedaishtasayar vayar aham eva vedyo. The purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. Eva, certainly. And how does one know Krishna? Through devotional service. Bhaktyamam. So, abhijanati. Yavanyaschasmi tattvata. So to know Krishna is the purpose of the Vedas. Many persons don't know the purpose of the Vedas. Many persons don't know the Vedas. But of those that know the Vedas, there may be some affinity for this or that or the other thing, and they think that's it. But Shukadeva is being asked, what's the essence? And the essence is devotional service. It's the pinnacle of the indirect processes, is the direct process. Direct meaning senses engaged in the service of the master of the senses, and the sense objects engaged in the service of the master of everything, making an offering of the bhakti to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's said twice in this chapter 2. Then comes this taking help from the intelligence. One can, even those who are not rich in bhakti, can at least understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead conceptually. And then comes this one, therefore. So, therefore is the conclusion, or the summary, or when you hear the tasmat word, then you pay special attention, because it's kind of like the cream on the top of the milk. It's the condensed form, the rich and condensed form of so many other things that were said previously. Tasmat. Therefore. And the emphasis in the purport is of the 9 processes of bhakti. So any form of bhakti or combinations of forms of bhakti are sufficient to lift one, elevate one to the standard of perfection. Of them, one is most important, the first one. Sound, if there's an absence of the sound of the Vedas, there will be the presence of some other sound. And with the presence of sound of the Vedas or some other sound, sound has an effect on consciousness. Non-Vedic sound has an effect of polluting consciousness. Or, saying it differently, same thing, sound has the effect of stimulating desires And if the sound is in the mode of ignorance, it stimulates ignorant desires. If the sound is in the mode of passion, passionate desires. If the sound is in the mode of goodness desires. And then there's transcendental sound, which directly awakens the soul. At least the potency is there to directly, it's on the same frequency, you could say. It directly connects with the soul and the soul's purpose, higher purpose, ultimate purpose. So hearing Vedic sounds is of paramount importance. Because I just gave a seminar on Manashiksha, Raghunath Das Goswami strongly advises not hearing mundane sound, nor hearing sounds that encourage liberation. He says that the mundane sound, acting within the heart, stimulates or produces a prostitute that steals the wealth of natural love for Krishna. It's stolen by the prostitute, just by asat-varta is the phrase that's used. Sound vibration that's in the realm of asat. That sound acts like a prostitute that sits in our heart and robs us like prostitutes, like the wealth of the person who they're interacting with. It takes their money, takes their wealth. So the wealth of the jiva is the wealth of bhakti, but bhakti is stolen because other desires, lusty desires, or the desires to be the enjoyer of sense objects, that kind of broad sense of what lust is. Senses, sense objects, let me enjoy. That's what mundane sound does. Of course, according to the modes, but that's what mundane sound does. And then a second kind of sound is talks of liberation. And in that case, he describes that talks of liberation awakes a tigress within the heart that devours the soul. You can't devour the soul because the soul is eternal. But in a metaphorical sense, it devours the soul. It's worse, in one sense, it's worse than mundane sound. Talks of liberation. And that's unfortunate. There's similar language in the Ishopanishad, the killer of the soul, Atmaha. Can't kill the soul. But a killer of the soul is one who turns their attention away from Krishna in material, or the negation of material, instead of turning their sound, Vedic sound, turns one's attention to the Supreme. That's its purpose. And there are different persons in search for the Supreme or in search for truth. So there's different qualities of sound. Then the highest quality of sound is the Srimad Bhagavatam and the names of the Supreme. That is a direct linking process. It awakens, it inspires the soul's natural tendency to serve the Supreme Lord. Just hearing that sound. Understand it or don't understand it. That's what that sound vibration does. And as one becomes lifted in consciousness and starts to understand, it becomes more enthusiastic or more spontaneous. At least the potential is there if one hears properly and carefully. And then from there, from hearing nicely, comes speaking. One feels the urge to make this message available. Just listening this morning to Prabhupada describing from Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, the same point. One who has heard nicely naturally will want to vibrate that sound, because one understands by hearing this sound, or by others hearing this sound, by my vibrating and others hearing this sound, then the door to liberation is open. The unnecessary struggle of the living entity in material existence is over. Or one is on the way to that position. To say it's over means the steps are being made in that direction. That one who understands that, they're very enthusiastic that others should receive the same benefit also. And wants, has a desire, not for gaining something, but for helping people become, again, happy, which is the soul's natural condition. But in forgetfulness, happiness isn't there, no matter what one does. Materially or liberation-wise, the prostitute and the tigress aren't good companions. And so Prabhupada goes on to say, in every country and every culture, there are persons that did like this, and he lists the names, where they extensively glorified the Lord by chanting always and in every place. So it's suitable for everyone. This is in direct contradiction or a different position than the Advaita followers. The Advaita followers say, who is eligible to hear the Vedas? What to speak of recite the Vedas, even to hear the Vedas? Is the twice born. And can somebody become twice born in their next life if they are born in such and such and such and such, but they're not eligible? It's just not eligible. So it's not for everybody in all circumstances, in their point of view. But that's not the point of view of this verse of the Bhagavatam, Sarvatra Sarvada. Sarvatra Sarvada. Always and everywhere. Sarvatra Sarvada. It's good to become purified, say, take your bath and have fresh clothes. But supposing somebody isn't sattvic like that, should they be barred from hearing? No. And as they become cleansed, they should be barred from speaking? No. It's meant for everyone everywhere, at all times. And because the Supreme Lord is everywhere, that's the conclusion of this purport. Is there some place where the Supreme Lord isn't? No such thing. I like Prabhupada's phrase. In this material world, there's two things: Krishna and Krishnas. And there's not a third thing. In the creation of God, there's no such thing as void. So Krishna is everywhere, at all times. So glorifying Krishna everywhere at all times is appropriate. Now, what form that glorification takes place can very well be time, place, circumstance considerations. There's just one more verse in this whole chapter, and then it changes. This is the Lord in the heart, and the next is the change of heart. Lord in the heart, meaning, emphasis in the whole chapter is on Paramatma realization, the meditation process to realize Paramatma. But as mentioned, there's other indirect processes that may help one to become a qualified meditator upon Paramatma feature. But the indirect processes may lead to a better indirect process, but the goal is to come to the direct process. So we're very fortunate. We just were given the direct process. Prabhupada calls the elevator method. In the elevator method, you don't have to walk up all the steps of all the staircases to get to the top floor. Just get in the elevator, press the button. Now that sounds like a little mechanical. It's not mechanical. It's very direct and very devotional. That's the process that we've been given. And by the process, we become qualified. Not that there has to be prior qualification to be in contact with the process. Very merciful. Very merciful. Naturally, Krishna's nature is he's very merciful, so the process to reach him is very merciful. And those who are thoughtful will accept it. So let's see if there's some discussion. This is Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 38, no, 36. And we just one more verse for the chapter. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
I hear a lot of times the verse from Chaitanya, another piece,
That's a nice verse.
Be very have so much tolerance all the time, and then be humble so that will help us or lead us to chant always the glories of the names of the Krishna. So in that, like I hear that all the time, but when sometimes I carried away by the situation or the context of something, and then I forget that I lose my tolerance. So that leads to frustration. So, but immediately after coming out of the situation, once I express my frustration or anger, then I'll remember and I'll say, why didn't I hear that their theory, and then
Yes.
Krishna has given me the opportunity to actually practically implement what I heard.
Good.
But in that context, I was so much carried away by the context.
Yes, I got it.
I forget even sometimes human consciousness. I come out of it and then I realize what did I do? What did I hear? But why I didn't follow? Why I was
So
captured by that?
is there a punchline to all of this?
No.
You're just commenting.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm asking like why, like
Why?
yeah, I carried away by it.
Oh, you know. It's identification with matter and the modes. So it's false ego, identification with matter, and the modes. Rajoguna leads to tamagun. Kamesha, krodesha. Rajoguna samudbhava. Rajoguna samudbhava. By contacting with the mode of passion, lust. From lust, I want to be the enjoyer of fill in the blank, something. When that doesn't happen, then frustration. So why? It's due to contact with and identification with matter. Now supposing one has contact with matter but doesn't identify with it. The tendency for krodha is gone. Say it the other way. Where does the tendency from krodha come from? It's from contact with rajagun. And when raja desires are unfulfilled, then becomes krodha. So if you have an expectation that you should be treated or spoken to in a certain way, or whatever it is to make people angry, something gets triggered, it's not the way that I wanted it. And so, krodha, it's contact with the modes. an identification of the self with what we're not, Maya. Or you can unpack the word Maya, and there's some of the threads that make up the situation that you described. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Prabhupada Ki Jai.